The warship tore through the fabric of space like a blade through silk. Inside the command center, Taman stood with his arms crossed behind his back, watching the stars blur past the viewing screen. He was tall, even by Velkrath standards, standing over 3 meters with muscles that could crush steel. His skin bore the deep scars of 100 battles, each one a mark of honor in his culture. Beside him, Hyejin studied the tactical display with sharp eyes. She was smaller than most Velkrath warriors, but twice as dangerous. Her mind could calculate battle strategies faster than most computers, and she had never lost a campaign. Together, they commanded the Crimson Talon, the most feared fleet in the Velkrath Empire. The Velkrath had ruled the galaxy for 3 centuries. They came from Velkros Prime, a world where gravity crushed the weak and storms could tear metal apart. Everything on their planet wanted to kill them, so they evolved to be unkillable. Their bodies could heal from wounds that would destroy other species. They could survive in the vacuum of space for short periods. They were born to be warriors, and they had conquered 73 star systems to prove it. Taman had killed his first enemy when he was 12 years old. By 20, he had led his first fleet. Now, at 45, he was considered the greatest warrior of his generation. He had defeated champions from a dozen different species. None had lasted more than a few minutes against him. Today should have been another simple mission. The Council had received a distress signal from a colony under attack by the Skrull. The Skrull were parasites, creatures that infected other species and turned them into mindless drones. The Velkrath had fought them before and always won, though the battles were never easy. But this signal was different. The data showed that another species had responded to the colony's distress call before the Velkrath could arrive. The transmission was fragmented, corrupted by interference. But the Council's analysts had managed to extract one word from it: humans. Nobody had heard of humans before. The galaxy was vast and new species were discovered occasionally, though most were primitive or already destroyed by stronger civilizations. The Velkrath expected to find either corpses or frightened survivors cowering in whatever shelter they could find. The fleet dropped out of hyperspace near the colony world. Taman stepped forward, his eyes narrowing at what the sensors showed. The planet was intact. The colony structures were still standing. And in orbit around the world, floating like broken toys, were the remains of an entire Skrull invasion force. Hyejin pulled up the tactical analysis. 47 Skrull ships, all destroyed. The weapon signatures were strange, nothing like Velkrath technology or any other known civilization. Some ships had been torn apart by kinetic weapons. Others showed signs of explosive damage. A few had simply been ripped open as if something had grabbed them and pulled them apart. Taman felt something he rarely experienced: curiosity. The Skrull were not easy enemies. A force of 47 ships should have been enough to overwhelm most colonies. Yet here they were, floating in pieces, and the colony below showed minimal damage. He turned to his communications officer. "Hail the colony. I want to speak with whoever leads these humans." The response came quickly. The face that appeared on the screen was strange. The creature was small, perhaps half Taman's height, with smooth skin and no visible natural weapons. It had 2 eyes, a nose and a mouth arranged in a configuration that seemed almost fragile. But those eyes were steady, showing no fear. "I am Minho, governor of New Jeju Colony," the human said. His voice was calm, measured. "You are Velkrath, I assume? We've heard stories about your empire." Taman studied the human with interest. The creature looked weak, but something about its bearing suggested otherwise. "I am Commander Taman of the Crimson Talon. We received a distress signal from your colony. It appears you no longer need our assistance," Minho nodded. "The Skrull attacked 3 days ago. We dealt with them. But your journey was not wasted, Commander. Perhaps we should meet. It seems our species have found each other, and first contact should be handled properly." Hyejin leaned close to Taman. "This could be a trap," she whispered. "We know nothing about these humans or their capabilities." Taman agreed, but his warrior instincts told him something else. Whatever these humans were, they had destroyed a Skrull fleet. That made them either very dangerous or very lucky. Either way, they deserved respect, at least until he understood them better. "We accept your invitation, Governor Minho," Taman said. "We will send a shuttle to the surface." The human smiled, an expression that showed teeth. Among Velkrath, showing teeth was a sign of aggression, but the human's body language suggested something different. Friendliness, perhaps, or confidence. As the transmission ended, Taman gathered his officers. Hijin would accompany him, along with 6 warriors from his personal guard. They armed themselves with the best weapons the Velkrath Empire could produce. If this was a trap, they would fight their way out. The shuttle descended through the atmosphere. Taman watched through the viewport as the colony came into view. It was larger than he expected, with buildings arranged in organized patterns. There were parks with strange plants, roads filled with vehicles, and structures that seemed to serve no military purpose. The shuttle landed in a designated area. Taman and his team emerged, weapons ready but not raised. A group of humans waited for them. They were all small, fragile-looking creatures. Some wore uniforms, but none carried visible weapons. Minho stepped forward. He was older than Taman had initially thought, with gray in his hair and lines on his face that suggested age. The human bowed slightly, a gesture of respect. "Welcome to New Jeju, Commander Taman. Thank you for coming. I know our species has much to learn about each other." Taman returned the bow, though it felt strange. Velkrath did not bow to anyone except their emperor. "Show us your world, Governor. Show us how you defeated the Skrull." Minho's smile grew wider. "Of course, but perhaps we should start with something simpler. Let me show you how humans live. I think you will find it interesting." As they walked into the colony, Taman felt that unfamiliar sensation again, curiosity mixed with something else. Uncertainty, perhaps. For the first time in his life, he faced something he did not understand. These humans looked weak, but they had accomplished something impressive. The pieces did not fit together. He decided to watch, to learn, to understand. Only then would he know whether these humans were potential allies or threats that needed to be eliminated. Either way, the galaxy had just become more interesting. Taman had expected military installations. He had expected weapons batteries hidden behind walls, soldiers drilling in formation, defense grids humming with power. Instead, Minho led them through streets filled with normal life. Human children ran through parks, laughing as they chased each other. Adults walked casually, carrying bags of food from markets. Elderly humans sat on benches, feeding small animals that seemed to have no fear. It was peaceful. Too peaceful. Taman's instincts screamed that something was wrong. No civilization survived Skrull attacks by being peaceful. Violence required violence in return. That was the way of the universe. Hyejin walked beside him, her eyes constantly scanning for threats. The Velkrath warriors behind them kept their hands near their weapons. But the humans seemed completely unconcerned by the presence of 3-meter-tall alien warriors in their streets. Some even smiled and waved. "This makes no sense," Hyejin whispered to Taman. "Where are their defenses? Where are their soldiers?" Minho overheard her. "Oh, we have soldiers. And defenses. But we do not build our entire society around war, Captain. Life is more than just fighting." He led them to a medical facility. Inside, a human woman waited for them. She was small even by human standards, with kind eyes and careful movements. She wore a white coat with symbols that Taman did not recognize. "This is Dr. Yunji," Minho said. "Our chief medical officer."
She has agreed to explain human biology to you.
"I think it will answer some of your questions." Yunji bowed slightly, then began her presentation. She showed them images of human anatomy, explaining their structure with scientific precision. Humans had no natural armor. Their skin was thin, easily damaged. They had no claws, no fangs, no venom. Their bones were fragile compared to Velkrath bones. Their strength was minimal. "By every measure," Yunji said calmly, "humans should not exist. Our world, Earth, was filled with predators faster, stronger, and better equipped than us. We had no natural weapons. We were not the biggest or the most dangerous." Taman leaned forward. "Then how did you survive?" Yunji smiled. "We walked, we ran, and we never stopped." She explained the concept of persistence hunting. Ancient humans would chase prey across vast distances. The prey was faster, but humans could run for hours without stopping. The prey would sprint away exhausted. Humans would catch up, walking steadily. The prey would sprint again. Humans would follow. Eventually, after hours or even days, the prey would collapse from exhaustion. Then humans would make the kill. "Our bodies are not efficient," Yunji continued. "We waste energy. We sweat instead of panting, which loses water. We need constant food. But we can continue moving long after other species must stop. We evolved to be persistent." Hyejin shook her head. "That is not a strength. That is just stubbornness." "Perhaps," Yunji agreed. but stubbornness kept us alive. Taman was not convinced. Persistence was not the same as power. The Velkrath won battles through overwhelming force, not by outlasting their enemies. He said as much. Minho nodded. Would you like a demonstration, Commander? I can arrange for one of our soldiers to show you what human endurance means in practical terms. Taman agreed immediately. Finally, he would see these humans fight. That would explain everything. They were taken to a training facility outside the colony. A human soldier waited for them. She was female. Shorter than most humans Taman had seen, with muscle visible beneath her uniform. Her name was Jiwan, and she held the rank of Sergeant. Minho explained the exercise. Sergeant Jiwan will participate in a pursuit simulation. She will be given a target location 100 kilometers away, through difficult terrain. She must reach it while avoiding detection. Your warriors may attempt to stop her. Taman selected 3 of his best trackers. They were elite soldiers, capable of hunting prey across entire continents. They would catch this human within hours, he was certain. The exercise began. Jiwan moved into the wilderness, and the Velkrath warriors followed. Taman watched from the command center, monitoring both parties through satellite feeds. The first day was simple. Jiwan moved steadily, never running, never stopping. The Velkrath warriors moved faster, using their superior strength to close the distance. They caught up to her position by sunset, but she was gone. She had hidden, rested for a few minutes, then continued while the Velkrath warriors searched for her. By dawn, she was kilometers ahead again. The second day was harder. The Velkrath warriors pushed themselves, using every bit of their enhanced physiology. They did not need much sleep. Their muscles could handle extreme exertion. They caught up to Jiwan again by midday. She evaded them again, not through speed or strength, but through patience. She moved when they rested. She chose paths they would not expect. She never stopped for long. By the third day, the Velkrath warriors were exhausted. Their bodies demanded rest. Their minds were foggy from lack of sleep. They had been moving for 48 hours with only brief pauses, and their enhanced physiology was reaching its limits. Jiwan reached the target location 60 hours after starting. She was tired, covered in dirt, and clearly in pain. But she had never stopped moving. The Velkrath warriors arrived 6 hours later, collapsing from exhaustion. Taman went to meet Jiwan personally. She was sitting on the ground, drinking water and eating simple food. When she saw him, she stood and saluted. Your warriors are impressive, Commander, she said. Faster and stronger than any human. In a direct fight, they would destroy me in seconds. But you won, Taman said. Jiwan nodded. I did not need to beat them. I just needed to continue longer than they could. That is the human advantage. We are not the best at anything specific, but we can keep going when others must stop. Taman sat down beside her, surprising everyone. Velkrath commanders did not sit with common soldiers, but he needed to understand. This is how you defeated the Skrull? He asked. Partially, Jiwan replied. The Skrull are aggressive. They attack in waves. Overwhelming defenses through sheer numbers. Most species panic or exhaust themselves trying to fight every wave. We simply prepared for a long battle. We rotated defenders. We conserved resources. We let them exhaust themselves against our defenses while we stayed fresh. You turned a battle into a marathon, Hygiene said, understanding dawning in her eyes. Exactly, Jiwan confirmed. And in a marathon, humans always win. That night, Taman could not sleep. He kept thinking about what he had witnessed. The Velkrath Empire was built on the concept of overwhelming power. They won battles in the first engagement, using superior strength and regeneration to crush their enemies quickly. But humans had found a different path. They were not stronger. They were not faster. They were not tougher. They were just persistent. They refused to stop, refused to quit, refused to accept defeat even when logic said they should. It was a terrifying thought. The Velkrath could be beaten in direct combat by many species. They won through their ability to heal and continue fighting. But what happened when facing an enemy that simply never stopped? What happened when the battle lasted days or weeks or months? Minho found Taman standing outside staring at the stars. The human governor carried 2 cups of a hot beverage he called tea. I thought you might want to talk, Minho said, offering 1 cup. Taman accepted it. The drink was warm, slightly bitter, but pleasant. Tell me about Earth, he said quietly. Tell me how your species learned to never stop. The emergency signal came at dawn. Taman was in his quarters on the ship when the alert sounded. He rushed to the command center where Hyejin was already reviewing the situation. Mining operation on the third moon, she explained quickly. Collapse in the main tunnel system. 200 workers trapped underground. Our rescue teams are 3 days away. Taman studied the data. The collapse was severe. Most of the trapped workers would run out of air within 48 hours. Even if rescue teams arrived in time, extracting them from the collapsed tunnels would take weeks. By Velkrath standards, it was an acceptable loss. The workers knew the risks when they took the job. Send a message to the mining director, Taman ordered. Tell him to seal the damaged sections and evacuate the surface facilities. We will investigate the cause of the collapse when our teams arrive. Before Hyejin could relay the order, Minho's face appeared on the communication screen. The human governor looked concerned but not panicked. Commander, we received the same distress signal. Our engineers can be at the mining site in 2 hours. We have equipment that might help. Taman was confused. Governor, those are Velkrath workers. This is not your concern. Minho looked at him with an expression Taman could not quite interpret. They are people who need help. That makes it our concern. Will you permit us to attempt a rescue? Taman wanted to refuse. Pride demanded it. The Velkrath did not need help from species they could crush with one hand. But he remembered the demonstration with Jiwan, remembered how humans had defeated the Skrull through methods the Velkrath had never considered. Perhaps they could do something his people could not. You have my permission, Taman said, but I am coming with you. The human rescue team assembled quickly. Leading them was a man named Daeho, an engineer with gray hair and scarred hands. He moved with the calm confidence of someone who had faced danger many times before. His team carried equipment that looked fragile compared to Velkrath tools, but Daeho handled everything with practiced ease. They arrived at the mining moon in a small human transport ship. The surface facilities were in chaos. Velkrath workers ran in different directions, some trying to organize rescue efforts, others simply panicking. Taman felt shame at seeing his people in such disarray. Daeho immediately took control. He did not shout or threaten. He simply began giving clear, calm instructions. He assigned tasks to both human and Velkrath workers, organizing them into efficient teams. Within an hour, the chaos had transformed into coordinated action. The first problem was stabilizing the collapsed sections. Velkrath equipment was designed for brute force, tearing through rock and metal. But the collapse had made the tunnels fragile. Using heavy equipment would cause more damage, potentially killing the trapped workers. Daeho's team brought smaller tools, precise instruments that could carefully support weakened structures without disturbing them. They worked slowly, methodically, reinforcing each section before moving deeper. It was frustrating to watch. Taman wanted to grab the tools and tear through the barriers by force. Hyejin stood beside him, watching the humans work. They are so slow, she muttered. But they are not causing more damage, Taman observed. Look at how they test each section before proceeding. They are preventing further collapse. Hours passed. The human teams worked without stopping, rotating positions but never pausing the operation. A human woman named Sora, who was a nurse, set up a medical station at the tunnel entrance. She treated minor injuries and kept everyone supplied with water and food. She moved between Velkrath and human workers without distinction, offering the same care to everyone. Taman watched as she bandaged a cut on a young Velkrath worker's arm. The worker was embarrassed by the injury, which was minor by Velkrath standards, but Sora treated him with gentle respect, explaining that even small injuries could become infected in dusty mining environments. She is wasting medical supplies on nothing, Hyejin commented, but Taman was not so sure. The young worker returned to his tasks, moving more efficiently, no longer distracted by the small pain. Perhaps the humans understood something about maintaining morale that the Velkrath had forgotten. After 30 hours of continuous work, Daeho's team reached the first group of trapped workers. 23 Velkrath miners were crowded in a small pocket, their air running low. The humans carefully extracted them one at a time, through a narrow passage they had reinforced. Taman expected the humans to rest after this success. They had been working for 30 hours without sleep. Their bodies must be reaching their limits. But they did not stop. They moved immediately to the next section, where sensors indicated more survivors. The second rescue was more difficult. The tunnel had collapsed completely, leaving no passage large enough for equipment. Tejo studied the problem, then made a decision that shocked Taman. "We go in manually," Tejo announced. "The space is too small for machines, but a person can fit through if they crawl." Hyejin objected immediately. "That is suicidal. If there is another collapse, anyone inside will be crushed." Tejo nodded. "Yes, but there are 17 workers in that section. Their air will run out in 8 hours. This is the only way." He called for volunteers. Every single human on the rescue team stepped forward. Tejo selected 5, including himself, and they prepared to enter the unstable tunnel. A human woman named Jinhee was among those selected. She was young, perhaps 20 in human years. But her eyes showed determination that reminded Taman of veteran Velkrath warriors. They watched through helmet cameras as the volunteers crawled into the narrow space. The passage was barely wide enough for a human body. It was dark, filled with dust, and every sound suggested imminent collapse. Taman found himself holding his breath as they moved deeper. It took 4 hours of careful crawling to reach the trapped workers. Jinhee was the first to make contact. Through her camera, Taman saw 17 Velkrath miners huddled in darkness. They were covered in dust, some injured, all terrified. "Hello," Jinhee said in surprisingly good Velkrath language. "My name is Jinhee. We are here to get you out. You are safe now." One of the miners was barely more than a child, an apprentice on his first assignment. He was crying, something Velkrath rarely did. Jinhee crawled to him and took his hand. "I know you are scared," she said softly. "I am scared too. But I promise you, I will not leave you here. We will get you out together." The extraction took another 40 hours. Each miner had to be carefully guided through the narrow passage one at a time. Jinhee stayed in the collapsed section, helping each worker prepare for the crawl. She talked to them constantly, keeping them calm, making them feel less alone in the darkness. When the last miner was extracted, Jinhee crawled out 72 hours after entering. She was covered in dust, exhausted to the point of collapse, but she was smiling. The young Velkrath apprentice she had comforted was waiting for her. When she emerged, he broke protocol and embraced her, crying into her shoulder. Taman watched this scene with growing confusion. He had led countless military campaigns. He had seen bravery in battle, had witnessed warriors sacrifice themselves for strategic victories. But this was different. These humans had risked their lives for people who were strangers, for a species that had arrived at their world with implied threats of conquest. All 200 miners were rescued. Not a single life was lost. Tejo's team had worked for 96 hours straight, taking only brief rotations for rest. They had succeeded through patience, precision, and a refusal to abandon anyone. That evening, Taman found Sora in the medical station. She was treating the last of the injured miners, her hands shaking from exhaustion. She had been awake for 80 hours, caring for everyone who needed help. "Why?" Taman asked her. "Why did you risk so much for us? We are not your people." Sora looked up at him with tired eyes.
"Because you needed help," she said simply.
"That is reason enough." Taman returned to his ship that night deeply troubled. In Velkrath culture, compassion was considered weakness. The strong did not help the weak except when it served strategic purposes. Mercy was a luxury that survivors could not afford. But he had watched humans demonstrate something that contradicted everything he had been taught. They had shown compassion not as weakness but as strength. They had risked death not for strategic advantage but simply because others needed help. For the first time in his life, Taman wondered if the Velkrath understanding of strength might be incomplete. The council's response was swift and harsh. Taman received a private communication from the capital, ordering him to cease all interaction with the humans and return immediately. The Velkrath Empire did not accept help from lesser species. The rescue had been an embarrassment, not a triumph. Taman stood in his command center staring at the message. For 3 centuries, he had followed every order without question. The Empire's commands were absolute. Disobedience was punishable by death, but something had changed. He thought about Jinhee holding the hand of a terrified young worker in the darkness. He thought about Sora treating injuries with gentle care. He thought about Tejo risking his life to save strangers. He deleted the message without responding. Instead, he sent a request to Governor Minho. He wanted to meet formally, not as a military commander assessing a potential threat, but as someone seeking to understand. Minho responded within hours, inviting Taman and his officers to dinner. Dinner. The concept was strange to Velkrath. They ate for fuel, consuming meals quickly between training sessions. The idea of making food into a social event seemed wasteful, but Taman accepted. Heejin accompanied him along with 3 other officers. They arrived at the governor's residence expecting a formal council chamber. Instead, they found a simple home with a dining room that smelled of cooking food. Minho greeted them warmly, along with several other humans. There was Yunji, the doctor they had met before, Sunwoo, an elderly human who taught at the colony school, and Jiwon, the soldier who had demonstrated human endurance. The meal was served family-style with everyone sharing from common dishes. The humans passed food around, talking casually about their day. It was informal, almost intimate. Taman felt uncomfortable at first, uncertain about the proper protocol. But gradually the atmosphere worked its magic. The food was good, complex flavors that Velkrath cuisine lacked. The conversation flowed naturally. The humans asked questions about Velkrath culture with genuine curiosity, not judgment. Finally, as the meal concluded, Taman asked the question that had haunted him. How did your species survive? Your world should have killed you. You have no natural weapons, no armor, no obvious advantages. By all logic, humans should have gone extinct long before developing intelligence. Sunwoo, the teacher, smiled at the question. He was old, his face marked with wrinkles that showed many years of life. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of knowledge earned through experience. You are correct, Commander. Earth tried very hard to kill us. For millions of years, we were prey. Lions hunted us. Wolves hunted us. Even the weather seemed determined to end our existence. We survived ice ages that destroyed countless other species. He gestured to the others around the table. We survived because we learned to work together. A single human cannot defeat a lion, but 10 humans working as a team can. 1 human cannot survive an ice age. But a tribe supporting each other can, Yunji added. Our bodies are weak individually, but our social bonds are our true strength. We evolved to cooperate, to feel empathy, to care for our sick and elderly even when they could not contribute to survival. These traits should have been weaknesses. Instead, they became our greatest advantage. Hyejin leaned forward, interested despite herself. But you did not just survive. You conquered your world. You eliminated predators that once hunted you. That requires more than cooperation. A shadow passed over Sunwoo's face. Yes, we did eliminate our predators. And then we nearly eliminated ourselves. He began to explain human history. The wars, the genocides, the centuries of violence. Humans had proven they were capable of destroying anything, including their own species. They had developed weapons that could kill millions. They had fought over resources, religions, ideologies. We learned, Sunwoo said quietly, that the ability to destroy is easy. Any species can learn to kill. The difficult thing, the thing that requires true strength, is learning when not to kill. Taman felt those words strike deep. The Velkrath had spent 3 centuries proving they could destroy anything they encountered. They had conquered system after system, demonstrating their power over and over. But what had they built? What had they created that would last? He found himself speaking before he could stop. We are empty. Everyone looked at him. Hyejin's eyes widened in shock. A Velkrath commander did not show such vulnerability, especially to outsiders. But Taman continued. The Velkrath Empire controls 73 star systems. We have defeated every enemy we have encountered. We are feared across the galaxy. And we are empty. Each victory feels hollow. Each conquest leaves us asking, what next? We are the apex predators of the galaxy. And we are alone because everyone fears us. The silence that followed was heavy. Then Minho spoke, his voice gentle. What do you want, Taman? Not what does your empire want. What do you personally want? Taman sat back, stunned by the question. What did he want? He had never considered it. Velkrath did not think about personal desires. They served the Empire. They fulfilled their duty. Individual wants were irrelevant. But now, forced to consider it, he realized the truth. I want to build something. I am tired of destroying. I want to create something that matters, something that will exist after I am gone, but I do not know how. Jiwon spoke up, her soldier's voice direct. Then learn. That is what we did. Humans spent thousands of years perfecting destruction. We were very good at killing, but we were not happy. So we learned different skills. We learned to build, to heal, to create. It was not easy. We failed many times, but we kept trying, Yunji added. The hardest part was admitting we needed to change. Pride almost destroyed us. We thought strength meant dominating everything around us. We were wrong. Real strength is knowing when to be gentle, when to show mercy, when to choose building over destroying. Taman looked around the table at these strange, fragile creatures. They had no natural weapons. Their bodies were weak. They should have been easy to conquer. Yet they had survived everything their world threw at them. They had fought off the Skrull. They had rescued 200 Velcrath miners without losing a single life, and they had done it all through traits the Velcrath considered weaknesses: cooperation, empathy, patience, compassion. Hyejin was watching him carefully. He could see the conflict in her eyes. She was thinking the same thoughts, struggling with the same realizations. Everything they had been taught, everything they had built their lives around, might be incomplete. If, Taman said slowly, if the Velcrath wanted to learn a different way, if we wanted to understand how to be strong the way humans are strong, would you teach us? Minho smiled. Of course. That is what teachers do. Sunwoo nodded. But I must warn you, Commander. Learning requires humility. It requires admitting you do not know everything. For a species that has conquered most of the galaxy, that will be the hardest lesson. Taman thought about the young Velcrath miner crying in the darkness. He thought about how Jinhee had comforted him, had promised not to leave him alone. That miner would return to Velcrath space changed. He had experienced compassion from an alien species. He had seen a different kind of strength. How many other Velcrath could benefit from learning these lessons? How many warriors were tired of empty victories? How many citizens wanted to build something lasting instead of conquering something temporary? I cannot speak for the Empire, Taman said. The Council will be angry that I have stayed this long. But I can speak for myself. I want to learn. I want to understand how you build instead of destroy. Hyejin took a deep breath, then nodded. I agree. If the commander stays, I stay. The Council can punish us if they wish, but this is too important. Around the table, the humans smiled. Minho raised his glass in a gesture Taman did not understand but instinctively recognized as celebration. Then let us begin, Minho said. Welcome to the hardest and most rewarding challenge you will ever face. Welcome to learning how to change. That night, Taman sent a message to the Council. It was not a request for permission. It was a statement of intent. He would remain at New Jeju Colony to study human culture and methods. Other Velcrath who wished to learn could join him. He expected punishment. He expected threats. Instead, he received a surprising number of private messages from other Velcrath commanders and officials. They were curious. They had heard about the mining rescue. They wanted to understand these humans too. Change was beginning, slowly, like water wearing away stone. And Taman realized that this moment, sitting at a dinner table with fragile alien creatures, might be more important than any battle he had ever fought. 6 months after the first contact, the transport ship arrived at New Jeju carrying 47 Velcrath from across the Empire. They were warriors, scientists, engineers, and administrators. All had volunteered to participate in what was officially called the Cultural Exchange Program. Unofficially, everyone knew it was much more than that. It was the first time in Velcrath history that their people had come to another species not to conquer, but to learn. Boyoung, a human administrator, organized the program. She was efficient and kind, traits that seemed contradictory to the arriving Velcrath. She greeted each visitor personally, learned their names, and assigned them to shadow human workers in various roles. The first week was difficult. The Velcrath students struggled with basic concepts. They did not understand why humans wasted time on art when functional design was sufficient. They could not comprehend why humans cared for individuals who could not contribute to society. They were frustrated by human inefficiency, by the slow pace of consensus building, by the emphasis on feelings over logic. Many wanted to quit. But Taman, now serving as a liaison between the two species, convinced them to persist. He shared his own journey, his own struggles with understanding. He reminded them that changing centuries of culture would not happen overnight. One of the students was a warrior named Sujin. She was young, fierce, and proud. She had killed her first enemy at age 13 and considered compassion a weakness. Boyoung assigned her to shadow Dr. Yoonji in the medical center. Sujin hated every moment at first. She watched Yoonji spend hours treating minor injuries that would heal on their own. She saw resources used on elderly patients who were dying anyway. It seemed wasteful, Pointless. Then a human child was brought in, badly injured from an accident. The child was dying and everyone knew it. Velcrath protocol would be to let death come quickly, to not waste resources on the inevitable. But Yunji fought for that child with everything she had. She worked for 16 hours straight, performing surgery after surgery. She used expensive medications, brought in specialists, did everything possible to save a life that was almost gone. The child died anyway. Sujin watched Yunji collapse in grief, crying for a patient she had lost. It seemed like weakness. All that effort, all those resources for nothing, but then the child's parents came. They held Yunji and thanked her through their own tears. They told her that knowing someone had fought so hard for their child meant everything. They said her compassion had given them comfort in the darkest moment of their lives. Sujin did not understand. She left the medical center confused and angry. But that night, she could not stop thinking about it. She remembered the parents' faces. She remembered their gratitude. She realized that Yunji had not been fighting just to save a life. She had been fighting to show that the life mattered, that the child was valued, that someone cared. It was a revelation that shook Sujin to her core. Another student, Hanul, was a strategic planner. He shadowed Daeho, the engineer who had led the mining rescue. Hanul was brilliant at destruction, at finding weaknesses in enemy defenses. But Daeho challenged him to use those skills differently. They worked on a water purification system for a struggling Velcrath mining colony. The existing system was failing and the workers were getting sick. Velcrath engineers had proposed replacing the entire system, which would be expensive and take months. Daeho approached it differently. He analyzed the existing system, found the specific components that were failing, and designed targeted repairs that would extend the system's life for years at a fraction of the cost. Then he taught Hanul how to train the miners to maintain it themselves. Hanul experienced something completely new, pride in building. He had always taken pride in his ability to destroy enemy installations. But creating something that would help people, that would improve lives, felt different. It felt better. A young Velcrath named Minjae volunteered at the colony school. He was uncomfortable at first, surrounded by small human children who seemed impossibly fragile. He did not understand what he was supposed to do. Sunwoo, the elderly teacher, put him to work reading stories to the children. Minjae thought it was pointless. Why tell children fictional tales when they should be learning practical skills? But the children loved the stories. They asked questions, imagined possibilities, developed empathy for characters who faced challenges. Minjae realized that stories were teaching tools, helping children understand emotions and situations before they encountered them in real life. One day, a child asked Minjae about Velcrath culture. What were Velcrath children like? What games did they play? What stories did they tell? Minjae realized with shock that he did not know. Velcrath children were trained from birth to be warriors. There were no games, only combat drills. There were no stories, only historical records of victories. The idea of childhood as a time for play and imagination did not exist in his culture. He found himself wondering what he had missed. What kind of person might he have become if he had been allowed to imagine, to play, to be a child? The transformation was not easy for any of them. Some Velcrath students did quit, unable to reconcile their culture with what they were learning. But others stayed and they began to change. They laughed more. They formed friendships with humans. They started to see strength in things they had previously dismissed as weakness. News of the exchange program reached the Velcrath Council. Traditional factions were outraged. They demanded the program be shut down, the students recalled, and Taemin punished for corrupting Velcrath culture. But Taemin had been promoted to counselor specifically for his experience with humans. When he stood before the assembly, he spoke words that no Velcrath had ever said in that chamber. For 3 centuries, we have proven we are the strongest species in the galaxy. Every species fears us. Every system we enter surrenders or dies. We have won every battle, conquered every enemy. And what has it given us? We are feared, yes, but we are also alone. We have no allies, no friends, only subjects who obey because they must. He activated a display showing data from Velcrath colonies participating in human cooperation programs. These numbers tell a story. Colonies working with humans show increased productivity, decreased conflict, improved resource efficiency. But more importantly, they show something we have no measurement for: happiness. Our people in these colonies report feeling satisfied with their work, connected to their communities, proud of what they build rather than what they destroy. The council chamber erupted in argument. But Taman continued, his voice cutting through the chaos. I am not suggesting we abandon our strength. I am suggesting we expand our definition of what strength means. The humans are not strong in the ways we are strong, but they have survived everything their universe threw at them through cooperation, persistence, and compassion. These are not weaknesses. They are different kinds of strength. The debate raged for hours. Finally, the Emperor himself spoke, his ancient voice silencing everyone. I will permit this experiment to continue, but Commander Taman, you will be held responsible for the results. Before Taman could respond, the emergency alert sounded. The Skrull had returned, launching a massive invasion into Velkrath space. 40 fleets coordinated attack, targeting multiple systems simultaneously. It was the largest Skrull offensive in recorded history. The traditional response would be to deploy Velkrath fleets to each threatened system. But Taman proposed something revolutionary: request human assistance and form joint defense forces. The council was divided. Accepting help from another species admitted that the Velkrath were not invincible. But the alternative was losing multiple systems and millions of lives. Minho agreed to help without hesitation. Human defense fleets were mobilized, and for the first time in history, human and Velkrath ships prepared to fight side by side. The battle was fierce. The Skrull had learned from their previous defeat at New Jeju, and came prepared with new tactics. But the combined human Velkrath forces were ready. Velkrath warriors provided overwhelming firepower and resilience. Human soldiers provided tactical flexibility and endurance. Velkrath ships could take massive damage and continue fighting. Human ships could coordinate complex maneuvers that confused enemy formations. Jiwan and Heejin worked together from the command ship, combining human strategic thinking with Velkrath combat experience. They created battle plans that used both species' strengths, covering each other's weaknesses. On the ground, Sujin fought alongside human marines. When a Velkrath warrior was injured, human medics provided immediate care. When human soldiers were pinned down, Velkrath warriors broke through enemy lines to rescue them. Neither species was fighting for territory or conquest. They were fighting together to protect both their peoples. The battle lasted 3 weeks. The Skrull were eventually defeated, but the victory came at a cost. Both species lost ships and soldiers, but they also gained something unexpected: mutual respect forged in combat. In the aftermath, something remarkable happened. Velkrath and human survivors did not separate. They celebrated together, mourned their dead together, rebuilt damaged stations together. The barriers between the species began to dissolve. The Velkrath Council could not ignore the results.